Ooh, should probably put my microphone down by my mouth, huh? That's exciting. Let's go ahead and pull that overlay down. Hey everyone! I just want to talk about our D&D 5e Kickstarter that has just now gone live this morning. It is exotic equipment perks. One thing that I've always found is that the 5th edition weapons and the equipment in general is very bland. And please let me know if you've kind of come to this same conclusion or have thought this in the past. Um, and Oops, let's get that off of there. And so we really wanted to do something about it. I've run numerous campaigns from level 1 all the way up to, I think the highest we've done recently is 15. But throughout that, if the weapon isn't magical during character creation, then it doesn't have that much of an impact beyond damage dice. And so we really wanted to change that up a little bit. Hey, Silverwolf, thanks for joining me today, buddy. Um, and so for me, I love character creation, and while I love 5th edition, it definitely missed the mark on a few things. And for me, weapons is that. I mean, even with um, the more common aspects of, say, uh, the keen mechanic from older editions, where it increased crit range, right? But got home from work. Yeah, I was lucky enough to take some time off today to work on prepping and getting the stuff for the Kickstarter pushed out. But so I'm accepting questions and answering your questions in regards to exotic equipment perks, or to give you guys more detail about them. And about the Kickstarter project as a whole, as well as I'm here to answer design questions or any D&D questions you may or may not have. At least that's the hope. So I kind of want to go through some of the um, story of why we created this. A couple years ago, I started tinkering around with what I called perks, basically little micro feats for the equipment in D&D, because we wanted to make it more engaging and more fun. Because very rarely would a rogue, for instance, use two daggers when they certainly can use two short swords that have a higher damage thresh or higher damage output. There's not really any incentive to want to use those weapons over something else, especially if you wanted to even just use a rapier instead of short swords. But at least in that situation, dual wielding short swords allowed you to get extra attacks for the rogue, for instance, to get that increase your chance to get sneak attack. But outside of that, it didn't really matter that much. To me, in D&D, the working from home, huh? Well, thank you, Andrew, for joining. Once again, ask questions about the equipment perks and about D&D in general for game design. We've put out almost 30 products, I think, right now, so we're getting pretty good at it. And I want to give feedback and answer everyone's questions about this, hoping that you'll be consider backing it and help bring it to life. I think we already passed the 25% threshold, so that's exciting. But really, when it comes down to it, character creation is probably everyone's favorite part of D&D, and I know it's mine. And so the weapon to me should be more than just a a side side piece, I guess, in your D&D character development. Um, Oh, thank you, Adam. He says, you definitely solved the problem of none of the weapons feeling interesting or unique. When I first saw weapon perks, it was like, this feels a need I didn't know I had. Um, Absolutely. And that's exactly how we kind of felt about it, too. It's one of those things that until you see it and realize that, oh, now I have a reason to play a barbarian that uses a maul instead of a greatsword or instead of a great axe, aside from damage type, which really isn't all that excuse the pun, actually, no, don't excuse it. The impact isn't really there very often. That's why anybody that notices our monster variants, many of them have weaknesses to the variety of different weapon types, because we want them to have a better impact. But yeah, so when it came to, designing the perks for my players, which honestly it started with my monsters, because I wanted my kobolds to be slightly different, but I didn't want to have to constantly redesign new mechanics for each of them. So I started with just giving them different benefits, like my kobolds or goblins that ran with daggers. They got an increased crit range. Honestly, that was just a pullover from a previous editions, right? For me at least. Andrew says he posted in several of his local D&D community Discord chats and got some good reactions. Thank you very much for the promotion. I really appreciate it. Silverwolf says he's still waiting for Watsy to make official weapon stats for the Japanese swords. Oh, my dogs are barking. I apologize for that. All of you on TikTok that are joining me, thank you very much. So that's not great. They get riled up. So it looks like Silver was talking about, Japanese swords. Part of exotic equipment perks is we did design some new uh pieces. Katana is one of them, which, yes, I know I was a big proponent of the long swords of katana. Just say it's a katana. But that was something that I had seen so many people wanted. So it's one of the weapons that, or one of the items that actually made it into the exotic equipment, which adds more options for your players that aren't magical. And I think that's a big thing, especially if somebody's going for a theme. But anyway, so I started designing these little perks for my monsters, and I'm like, oh man, these are really cool. Since it's tied to the weapon and not to the. Hey, thanks for joining, Teddy. Since it's tied to the weapon and not the monster, I can just start adding it to all of my monsters, which honestly was super fun, because now anytime I wanted to change a monster, literally all I had to do was change its armor or its weapon. Though the armor came much later. Andrew says, of course, you get all the promo from me. It wasn't for the encouragement by y'all. I never would have made the megalo piebald's better beetle swarms. Yes, those are awesome, and I really enjoyed reading through those. And that's the thing, right? We spend so much time doing. Are we on Twitch? I am on Twitch, Facebook, YouTube, TikTok, and some other platforms nobody watches. Yes, but I'm gonna try to keep an eye on both and answer both questions from the TikTok and the other feeds. Those ones all feed into the one stream feed, though. TikTok hasn't made that jump yet. So yeah, so now I'm changing up my monsters a little bit just by giving them different weapons. And eventually some of the players caught on. They're like, that that goblin with the maul, it stunned me. And of course it's, the one thing that the one thing I really decided needed to be important is that not all the perks were just damage based. We wanted to make them feel different, but not just boosting damage, because then you're right back to the situation of the equipment only being tied to damage. So we tried really, really hard to avoid that, whether it was to encourage the exotic equipment perk to be of a particular use. The one that really comes to mind that was one of my favorite designs is, I'm a big fan of like the classic fencing type sword fights. So when I think sword fights, I think fencing and musketeers and reposting and stuff like that. So it made sense to me, at least from my, at the time, limited standing of how a rapier is designed for thrusting and parrying, that I wanted a rapier to do something like that. But we didn't want to tread right on to just what like the Battle Master does, right? It is worth noting that exotic weapon perks, or exotic equipment perks, excuse me, all the perks require you to be proficient with the item. So if you're not proficient with it, you can't really gain the perk of benefit. You can still use the weapon just like in 5th edition's normal rule set. But this way it has some sort of requirement for those that just want to pick it up for the perk. Going back to the rapier, for instance, by normal stance, the rapier basically deals 1d4 or 1d8 damage and has piercing or finesse effect and deals piercing damage. In and of itself, that's not much different than I don't know, what was one of the other d8 weapons here. You think I'd have all this memorized by now as much as I've read it. The Morning Star, for instance. The Morning Star does the same type of damage, it just doesn't have the finesse property, right? So instead of just boosting damage, we're like, well, what can we do to encourage players to be more strategic about their weapons and the choice of style that they want to use? Adam, thank you so much. He says, I'm definitely going to back this project, but I'm only familiar with this and the previous weapon perks. What are some of the other materials you have written that consider the best or most popular? Well, hands down, weapon perks and hopefully equipment perks will become our biggest bestseller. Or are you talking if you're talking about other player options, we do design a lot of class options. And we've got one race, the Werecat, and then a bunch of class options because I really like the designing aspect of the D&D game. So I recommend maybe picking up our, if you want to check it out, the designing of how we make things seem different. Check out maybe our newest one, the Gambler, or maybe the Skybreaker, which is a fighter sub archetype that focuses on making people fall the wrong way. So anyways, for the rapier, I wanted it to be to encourage the use of some of the other mechanics that we don't usually see. And so for this one, we decided to focus on the dodge action. So in order to get that repost, most people would say, well, use your reaction or something like that. So we changed it. Well, how about if they're planning on somebody striking them and are on the active defense, that they have to actively be on the defense. So by taking the dodge action while using a rapier, for instance, if an enemy misses you with a melee attack, you can use your reaction to make a melee attack against them. Additionally, you get to add your wisdom modifier to that attack roll. So now this specifically encourages a very specific type of play with this weapon. If y'all ever release a war corgi, I'm 100% going for it. I will definitely take that into consideration. But yeah, so the design aspects, we looked at a lot of like some of the old style feats too. Because one thing that the old 3.5 and 3.0 and older editions did is the feats were weaker by comparison to like 5th edition. And so we kind of wanted our weapon perks to kind of almost be like micro feats, right? Where they're not so overpowered that you're always going to take that weapon, but the core could be a change of strategy of how you play. A really good example would be Silver Wolf says talents. Yes. Um, a really good example would be the daggers, which I'll keep coming back to because that's one of the ones that I see hardly never get used. I mean, quite literally, if I'm not mistaken, the only difference between the dagger and the dart is the distance it can be thrown. Everything else is the same, which comes back to 5th edition's normal problem anyway, which is all the equipment is a lot of it's the same. So you already have a small margin of choices. With exotic equipment perks, we wanted to make those choices larger, not only by expanding to exotic equipment, but also enhancing the stuff that's in the player's handbook that the players can use and or the monsters. And we took really into consideration the theme and the nature of every weapon. We also got some really fantastic lore that was written for each individual weapon and armor. Like for instance, the dagger says the dagger is a versatile weapon that is used in a wide variety of cultures, fighting styles, and levels of experience. Because it is such a widespread and well-established weapon, it is difficult to pinpoint its origins. It's quite possible that it began as a simple farming tool that eventually took a more sinister implication, took on more sinister implications. However, given that it is not typically used in farming purposes in its current state, it is also theorized that they were intended as weapons and may have been an early precursor to their larger counterpart swords. So the team and I, which is me and one other writer, focused on trying to make sure that there was good story that the DM could leverage and add that into their campaigns if somebody asks about a weapon, especially the exotic ones. But you couldn't just give it to the exotic weapons; you had to do it to both, right? So it created these really nice little stories that are tied to the backstory of each individual weapon, which then also helps explain why they have a feature that they might have, which is really cool. In the case of the dagger, it has the hidden weapon feature, which means as a bonus action, you can basically do a sleight of hand to hide up to 2 of them contested by enemy insight. And if you do, you increase your crit range on the next attack, which is fantastic. But we realized that through playtesting that wasn't really uh, um, it wasn't as frequent as the player would have liked, so they still end up wanting to choose like a short sword. So without we could have increased the damage range or the crit range more, but we decided, what if we put another condition in there that's very, very specific? Will happen, but it's not at the players within the player's control, but they can encourage other players to help them with it. So we ended up deciding on giving an ability like a backstab. We call it cheap shot, where while wielding a dagger, when a creature within 5 feet of you is hit with a critical hit, you can exploit the distraction. You can use your reaction to make a melee weapon attack with a dagger against that creature. So this way, um, there is an increased opportunity now to get that crit based on the actions of allies, which encourages this more team organization and strategy, which I like to see more of in my D&D games. I'm not sure about you, but that's something that's important to me. And so we kind of used this. I mean, we reiterated some of these multiple times. I'm actually looking at my draft document, and I can see another one we had in here that's off to the side in the comic called Bait and Switch. So there was a lot of playing around with the fifth edition rules, looking at old games, looking at other RPGs and some of the things that they've done to really get the most out of each weapon. And so, you know, and it's not just the weapons too. Like the equipment and the armor in fifth edition isn't very exciting either. Basically, you either have a disadvantage on stealth or you have a higher AC. That's it. So once you get a higher level or enough money to buy a better piece of armor, you're never going to go back. So we had questioned whether maybe we should consider giving a reason to use those, even if there's armor out there with higher AC that they have access to. And of course, bundling it with, characters who are constantly carrying a bag of holding and just chucking everything in there gives them more options when they're prepping to going to a battle. And so almost encouraging them to get the better piece of equipment. A really great example is hide armor, right? Hide is the lowest level of the medium armors, with a 12 plus your dex with a max of 2. That's it. That's all it does. So once you get access to chain shirt, there's no reason to wear hide. Well, we decided, what can we do that can make hide appealing, even if its AC is a little bit lower? And if you've guys got questions, please ask, whether you're on TikTok or any of the other platforms I'm streaming to. Please ask all about exotic equipment perks. I'm here to answer, especially if you're on the fence about whether you want to back it or help bring this project to life. I'm here to answer your questions. That's why we're doing this live. So back to the hide. So let's start with the lore behind this, because I think it'll then make sense and lead into the mechanics. So for hide, it says dire wolves of the frozen peaks were vicious predators, but their pelts were thick and well adapted to the frigid climate they seemed to prefer. Bugbears, exiled to these icy mountains, found themselves ill-equipped to deal with harsh environments. The dire wolves did them no favors, slowly picking off their numbers one by one. The bugbears, determined to survive in the wilderness, fought back against the aggressive dire wolves and integrated their tough, warm pelts into their traditional armor pieces. Not only did this protect them from the harsh, frigid environment, but it also provided them with an increased defense against dire wolves and other nearby threats. So, how did we adapt that sort of strategy? We gave hide armor cold resistance, a simple buff, passive. It gives you a reason to wear it. So the nature of the hide that is crafted with the thick furs and pelts makes it extremely resistant to frigid climates. While wearing this armor, cold damage is reduced by an amount equal to your proficiency bonus. In addition, you have advantage on saving throws made against the effects of extreme cold temperatures. So this was interesting way to give it a mechanical benefit without delving into the realm of magical, because that's something we certainly wanted to stay far away from during our development. We don't want items to be considered magical. So when you get a magical hide piece of armor, you also gain this cold resilience of feature. It's not just the non-magical, it's not just the non-magical equipment, but it should be applied to all equipment, whether it's magical or not. And I think that that's an important thing to note, because there's then no reason to feel like you're being punished by upgrading to a magical item, if that makes sense. Um, so we really wanted to push that theme throughout the entire process of developing our exotic equipment perks. Which, if you are watching, I do want to say just a moment, if you're interested and this does sound like something you want to support, please consider heading on over to rebrand.ly/exotic perks and become a backer and help bring it to life. We have most of the content already written. We have been writing and working and play testing and stuff for the last, I don't know, 6+ months. So, and we got a pretty good head on our shoulders from our previous product, the weapon perks, which these are compatible together, right? So if you have one, this one will have new options for you. And you can choose, or even let your player choose between the two if you do get both. So definitely consider checking that out. Do you guys have any questions about exotic equipment perks, or maybe what are some challenges you've run into with weapons and armor and things that you would like to see done differently in D&D? Because I know that as I read other RPGs and other older editions, there are way more opportunities for us to enhance our tabletop game than just being forced to homebrew everything. And I think that, of course, leaves a big opportunity for small, publishers like me. But so I want to. Oh, here's a good question coming from Silverwolf. It says, "How will these be implemented into D&D, both narratively and mechanically?" So the idea is that when you're proficient with something, you've understand it. You're not a person that just picked it up, right? Because we as soon as you become an adventurer, you get a proficiency bonus. The assumption there is that you have practiced and trained with that, right? And that's why your proficiency scales the longer you combat, the higher level you get, because you're getting better, more proficient. So because we limited access to perks to proficiency, it falls in line and story wise that this person has practiced with this, and this is probably a common technique used by those that practice. I want to go back to the rapier example. The rapier is generally considered a defensive weapon, not an offensive one. You stay back and you thrust. So the mechanic reflects that kind of common theme and practice with the weapon. Another really great example with this, and this is something that we struggle not to oversimplify, a great club, for instance. A great club, I've never seen a player use a great club. It's because it's a 1d8 damage weapon. It's a simple weapon, so anybody that's going to use it probably has martial training already, so they have no reason to. So we had to figure out a way of, okay, what makes sense for a giant great club? Something that is going to fit the theme and concept behind the weapon or the item. I think my bot's not working 100%. That's not great. I don't know how to fix that. Is anybody, are you posting and missing something? If it is, or is it not just working inside of Discord? You might have to go to one of the other platforms. Oh, that's really strange. What platform were you at first, Raiden? Because it says he had to go to Discord to post it. That's not great. I'll have to look into that. I don't know if I can fix it right now, but thank you for calling it to my attention. On YouTube, really? I see Andrew's post. That's very strange. I hope there's not anybody else watching on YouTube trying to post. Thank you for bringing that to my attention. I'll try to figure that out after the fact. Is anybody else on YouTube watching that can comment, see if it pops up on the restream? All right. So, anyways, the Great Club, we wanted to fit the theme of this giant, barbarian used weapon, which we tied into the history of the Great Club, is hotly contested by scholars. Some say it evolved from Barbarian Clan's traditional club games, wherein some contestants brought increasingly larger club variations until the clans decided they needed to set some solid boundaries. And it goes on to explain some other stuff. But so tying this into the mechanics and the narrative, we chose Crippling Slam, which basically means on a hit, you can forego normal weapon damage. And if you do, which means you're not going to get the 1d8 damage, if you do, the creature takes damage equal to your strength mod and must succeed a strength saving throw, or the creature's speed becomes 0 until the end of their next turn. On a critical hit, the damage is doubled and the target is knocked prone. So this weapon specifically, the playstyle for this weapon is specifically for somebody who wants to lock down and stop an enemy from getting away. That's its core. Basically, it's an ankle breaker. At least that's the term we were throwing around, right? Yeah, I'm sorry, dude. Drayden, that's not great. I don't wish I could do anything from this side, but I don't think I can at the moment. But thank you for taking time to go to Discord or Twitch or Facebook. Either one of those probably would work. I'm kind of curious if those other ones work now. But anyways, so once again, any more questions in regard to game design, maybe, or about exotic equipment perks, please let me know. Did you have a question, Drayden, that you wanted me to answer? Since you it failed to send to me. All right, so I want to give a couple more examples of some of the exotic weapons and the exotic armor. So, for each of the exotic armors, yes, whips. What did you do to make them better? Yes. Okay, so let's talk about whips. Whips really did get the long end of the stick, didn't they? So the most obvious solution was ensnaring slash. There's no reason why somebody can't use a whip to bind, restrain, or grapple a target, right? So for us, that made sense, but that really didn't feel like enough. It didn't feel like enough of a tool, because once you restrain somebody with a whip and force them to use a saving throw, you no longer can use the whip, right? So we felt like it needed more than that, because then every time you use your weapon, you're not going to get it. Though it is worth noting, if you pick up the dual wield feat and dual wield these, they become significantly more valuable. Anyways, so we decided what are other ways we can include and make it more desirable. And we gave it Vine Whip, which basically it allows you to Indiana Jones it and crack your whip onto some sort of terrain and swing yourself up to 15 feet without any check at all, which is super beneficial. It basically has similar effects to the Climber's Kit, right? It also allows you to, so it grants it like advantage on your climb checks, because you're using it like a rope and climbing up, as well as being able to swing 15 feet. But once again, there was something else that came up that whips are used for. I don't know about anybody else, but I've been to the circus and I've seen them crack the whips to intimidate animals. So bullwhip crack became another mechanic that when you make a charisma intimidation check, if you use your whip to crack, you can double your proficiency bonus on the check. So that gives 3 different uses for this one item. Now, you'll notice none of those do damage. They're all utility based when it comes to the whip. The whip already doesn't do much damage. So we really struggled with whether that should get a damage bonus, but we tried to stay away from that as much as we can. There are some spots where some stuff just some weapons do get damage bonuses. So dual wielding whips, you can monkey sweep. Yes, you can basically monkey swing through the forests as long as you got enough stuff to scratch on. Now I want to play a whip Tarzan character. That sounds awesome. I love it. So when we had perks that were so much weaker than others, we tried to give them multiple perks. And there's only a few of those in this instance. I think there was a little more of them in our original design, but we went through and designed a few to be a little stronger. but because there is a balance there, right? If one weapon does less damage, you're going to want maybe the utility to be more versatile, right? Um, let's talk about. I want to talk about one of our exotic or some of the other armors, right? Uh, Let me scroll down through my draft here, and the editor's in the middle of writing it or editing it, so there's a bunch of text in the way. So there is there. So before I get to the armor, there are some equipment that suck, that they are worthless. Can anybody name one? Well, I used to think it sucked. The net being one for me. Um, has anybody in the chats ever used the net in their games at all? When playing D&D? Thanks for joining Shell's house. um, so we're just like, nope. So the net is arguably typically considered pretty worthless. Now, my opinion on this has changed since I watched a PvP match where the barbarian got netted while raging and couldn't get out of it with his advantage on his checks. And then his rage ended because he was netted. And it was the most hilarious, also the saddest time I think I've seen a barbarian. Not the player's fault, right? His competitor was very prepared, hadn't seen it. Looks like Drayden has used an oil and soak it in oil and set it on fire. That's nice. That's the kind of stuff I like. So let's talk about what change we made. So nets don't get used because they have a really crappy range, 5 feet to 15 feet. So we basically allowed the person that when somebody enters your reach, it provokes an op attack while you're holding a net, and you can chuck the net over top of them, and so they might get stopped and restrained right then, preventing their attack on you. So now it becomes a utility crowd control ability as well as a defensive tool. Welcome, Ben. And is that? I don't know if that scrolled. Did I miss something? No, there we go. Trying to trying to keep up with this on here. So yeah, so we wanted it to focus on that, but we wanted it to be more than that. We wanted to encourage the players to use it. So additionally, piercing attacks against a creature restrained by the net deals extra damage equal to the attacker's proficiency bonus. So while this doesn't necessarily buff the user's damage, it can buff an ally's damage, but the ally has to specifically be using a piercing weapon. So it's very situational, but it can add up, especially if that net lock is stuck on somebody for more than one round. So that's kind of the theme we've been going with. So the other thing that I wanted to touch on is the varieties of armors that we've used in our exotic equipment perks live on Kickstarter right now. So if you haven't already and it sounds interesting, please consider becoming a backer. It's the first 24 hours. It's most critical to the success of a project. Drayden says net hooks, hooked net, harder to escape from. Honestly, we had delved into making an exotic net, and we ended up doing that, but we just used bolas, which are basically, the two balls on the end of a rope and you throw it. So we ended up landing there instead of having another net, but it's very similar. It does have a little bit farther range as an exotic. Let me go and scroll over to where this is at, and I'll talk a little bit about it. Anybody on TikTok, if you got any questions, please let me know. Happy to answer them. We also want to talk about shields. One thing, there was a lot of complaints that from the polls that I took about 5th edition having only one shield and kind of it covering everything. I don't think anybody was happy with that, but I understand the reasoning behind some more simplified design. So we did some changes with that too. But anyways, I want to get into the Bolas, which is a exotic weapon, exotic ranged weapon, right? And it has, of course, the exotic property. Its thrown range is 20 to 40, so it's still pretty short range, but it also has a special property, kind of like some of the other weapons in 5th edition. So one of our favorites, and we went back and forth on this and a couple other ones. this one has blinding throw. When you hit a creature with a ranged weapon attack with this weapon on a hit, you can forego the normal traits and attempt to toss the bolas around their head. If the creature is huge or larger, they can use a reaction to make a DC. A creature can use their action to make a DC 15 strength check, freeing itself or another creature next to him on a success. Dealing 10 slashing damage does mess up your bolas just like the net. When you use an action, bonus action, or reaction to attack with the bolas, you can make only one attack regardless of the number of attacks you would make, right? So just like a net, you're throwing it, so it's not like you can, unless you've got another one, you can't really do a whole lot with it. But let's go back to the special mechanic that it has. So I only talked about the perk. Part of the weapon design for the weapons in the armor is to make sure that all our new armors and new weapons follow the same WotC format. That's really good. Drayden says, I imagine bolas that get tangled like headphones in your bag of holding. Make sure you keep them stored properly. That's so true. What is the special property of the bolas? It's essentially a better net, right? Larger, smaller creature hit by the bola is grappled. Bolas have no effect on creatures that are formless, just like a net. A creature they can use an action to make a DC 15 check, freeing itself, dealing 10 damage on it, locks it up. So you basically have two things you can do. You can either throw it at their feet and restrain them, or throw them at their head and potentially blind them. And so we wanted to go both ways. So I imagine you throw a pair of bolas at somebody's head and they spin around. Those two little rocks on the end are going to, smash into each other and probably the target's face. So we really wanted to get a lot of that across. So that was a big one, especially because it gives you a longer range, which is really, really necessary to get any sort of benefit from, right? All right. What else we got? I wanted to we did add some special new items for the exotic weapons. Rope dart is a really fun one. It's basically a dart on the end of a rope with a 20-foot to 30-foot range. And just very much Jackie Chan based, where he's got a horseshoe on the end and he's flipping it around. If you've seen the new Mortal Kombat movie with Scorpion and his dagger trowel attached to the end of a rope. So of course we had to give that, it's a two-handed weapon. It does 2d6 piercing. It is finesse, and it does have the loading property, which means you can't use it with extra attack. So it's very much designed for creatures that don't have extra attack. Rogue is the first thing that comes to mind, but it's not limited to that. The perk for it is nimble return. So when you take the attack action and make a range attack, hit or miss, you can attempt to hit a creature within the rope dart when the rope dart returns. You can use your action to make another ranged attack against a different creature within 5 feet of you. The attack deals 1d4 plus your strength or dexterity modifier piercing damage. It's worth noting that when you make a ranged attack in melee, you typically have disadvantage on that. So keep that in mind. We have debated heavily on whether that just needs to be make an attack, because it is a dagger on the other end and you can hit it as it comes back. We're still, we think we're going to settle with how it is, but we can see an argument both ways. So hopefully some more thought on that, but that's where we ended up. There are mechanics and feats that allow you to overcome that, right? Something to keep in mind. We also have the shuriken. I mean, who doesn't love shurikens, right? It's one of my favorite weapons from story and lore, right? But I do want to touch on some of the property changes that we added. So we added a new property called chain. And several of the new exotic weapons have this, which basically means if a weapon has the chain property, when it rolls a 1 on its damage die, you can use your reaction to roll another weapon die and add it to your total. So this helps offset the lower, weaker weapons rolling the ones and really stiffen themselves. That was the intent, at least. And when on our nunchuck, that's actually end up being a really cool design mechanic for it, because it is a 1d4 um, weapon, although exotic. And with the finesse and light property, rolling a 1 on those is sucky. So giving those the extra chain mechanic kind of allowed it to increase its lower end damage a little bit without increasing necessarily significantly increasing its top end damage. Um, and of course, that's got a really fun perk too. That involves the Maelstrom defense, which basically, I've watched enough kung fu movies. They're flinging them around and knocking away arrows and stuff. So of course that we would add that. So the lightning speed at which you can move your weapon enhances your defense. When you take the dodge action, once again, you're actively taking on a action that's not just attacking. Roll your weapon's damage dice until the start of your next turn. You gain a bonus to your armor class equal to the number rolled. So now you can potentially get anywhere between a 1 and a 4 added to your uh, AC while creating this maelstrom of nunchuck swirling. So those are kind of the things that we really put into our design. A lot of thoughts, a lot of concepts that would be outside of just boosting damage. We wanted the weapons to be more engaging, especially when the player shows forethought in their planning. Thanks for joining, Clay. Um, so it really is it's a long process, a lot of work, but I'm really happy with how it came out. Of course, some of uh, the exotic weapons themselves uh, require a special condition to actually learn. So if it has the exotic property, basically it requires special training to become proficient with. This training is acquired by spending at least 1 year of downtime training, which follows the downtime rules of D&D, or being a race that first crafted the weapon and required feat. Um, a good example is the Elven Blade. Elves automatically are proficient with the Elven Blade. We do note that it's at the GM's discretion. The other way is there is a very worthless feat that nobody ever takes called Weapon Master. It gives you access to 4 weapons proficiencies. Nobody ever takes it. This feat also is a way to get access to these proficiencies. Of course, you still got to get those weapons, right? Not every store is going to have an exotic weapon. That is left at DM's discretion. The assumption should be that the player characters that have a race or a feat at level 1 would probably be having those. And that is encouraged in the book. So, all right, I'm going to be wrapping it up. I got some stuff to take care of. Do you guys have any last questions before I jump out of here? If I could, I would have had that feat for druids. Um, why not? Well, is there a reason why you couldn't have it? I mean, it's 4th level. You pick your feat, pick up Weapon Master. So, all right. I think looks like there's not very any more questions. So, just want to say thank you to everyone that watched or joined. We work very hard on this project, and we'd like to see it brought together as a new addition to every Dungeon Master's home. So back it if you believe in it. If I know not everyone has money, so even just sharing the Kickstarter with your friends really does help. And I want to say thank you for your time, and hopefully you enjoyed hanging out and some of these questions. Druids and metal, right? I think that's only for armor. I think that they can wear metal, and it's not actually a solid raw rule. I think they can wear metal. It's just something that they don't typically do. All right. Well, I will see you guys later. Thank you guys on TikTok for joining me. Please consider joining us on Sunday live, as we every Sunday on YouTube we talk D&D. I'm really excited for this Sunday's topic. We're going to be talking CD dives, I think. and how to make them in your world building experience. Yeah, world building, how to create a seedy dive. So please come and join us on Sunday at 7 p.m. Eastern. We'll be live on TikTok and, of course, every other platform that we're always live on. Oh, wow. It wants me to send messages to people. That's certainly not where I was going. See you later. All right. And that'll do it for me, guys. Thank you guys so much for joining me. I appreciate it. And I'll send you out with this. Keep your blades sharp and spells prepared, heroes. I'll see you guys later.